Hello, welcome to another session of Digital Forensics and Investigation. This session is based on report writing techniques. So, in the last session, we discussed the forensic soundness. We also saw the requirements to build a live forensic response toolkit, and we discussed and see that how you can test the tools and the commands that you will be using in the live response toolkit. We also discussed the free available forensics toolkits, the order of volatility, and the general methodology for the live forensics process. In the end, we discuss memory extraction and analysis tools. In this session, we will see the scientific methods and the steps involved in the scientific methods with an example. And also, we will see the report writing technique by looking at its structure, uh, the importance of clarity in the writing, the layout and presentation techniques, and also the importance of conclusion section. As you are aware that the ultimate goal in any investigation is to discover the truth. So the digital forensic investigation may vary because it depends on many factors such as the type of the computing or the electronic device, and whether the investigation is in the criminal context or in the civil context. Also, preparation is a key to any task. The more one prepares for the task, the outcome would be better. So it is always best practice to approach an investigation using a very formalized and trusted methodology, which will definitely and ultimately results in a more complete and thorough investigation. Also ensures that all the evidences are properly handled and all the required steps were taken to achieve the final goal. Some organizations like military and law enforcement agencies, these are all investigating a range of incidences, and they normally have their own methodology, so which they call it as a framework, which they follow to successfully complete an investigation. So then what is the scientific method? So there are many definitions of the scientific methods, and they all vary in terminologies only. So the scientific technique is the process which actively seeks evidence that prove or disprove a hypothesis and review the conclusion. So you can say that in the scientific method, you test and examine that why and how a particular event occurred. So there are few steps that are most common in the digital investigations. And those steps include, for example, defining a questions like what happened, how did it happen, sometimes accepting a question. So sometimes the investigator is given a series of questions to answer. So in that case, we can say that the investigator accepted the questions. Also, the investigator should gather the information and the resources to observe the evidences. Also, there is a need to form an explanatory hypothesis to find the or to analyze the evidence and to reach to a conclusions. Of course, when the hypothesis is ready, then in the next step, those hypothesis is tested and the data is analyzed. And from that analysis and the result, the investigator draws a conclusion. So these are the journal steps that are usually included in any scientific methods of investigation. So here is an example that, for example, an investigator has been called to investigate the possible compromise of a critical server. So the first question that can be defined is the was this server compromised? If so, so what was the attack vector? How did the attacker gain access to the server? Was it online or was it a physical access? So then we can create two hypotheses for that. The initial hypothesis is that access to the machine was via the network. So the attacker used some remote access techniques to access the network. The alternative hypothesis is the attacker accessed the system or the server via a console. So in order to prove that the attacker accessed the server via console, we need to set a few action. So there is a need to prepare a plan for that. So the first action would be examine the login history via the console. and we need to see that who has logged into the console, and what was the time, what was the date. Um, so so by examining that, of course, we need some sort of forensically sound tools and methodologies to do so. So here we assume that during that analysis, we found that there is no evidence of login via console in the last 7 or 5 weeks. So it means no one accessed the system via console in the past, let's say, 7 weeks. Then the next action should be related to this login history to see that if the server logs have been tampered or not. Because there is a possibility that someone tried to log into the system or log into the system in the last week, let's say, or a couple of few days ago. But that attacker or that person changed or tampered the logs history. So we need to check, is there any evidence of tampering or no. So by doing so, we observe that there is no evidence of log tampering. Therefore, we can discard the alternative hypothesis that the machine was compromised via console access. But still, we have the first or the initial hypothesis. We need to test that as well. So to test that, again, we need to plan an action, and we need to perform those actions. For example, examining the list of running processes. So does those processes reveal anything suspicious or no? So if any one of the process reveals something suspicious, so we can say that something has accessed the system via network. So we will continue to do our research to see the log files for any login attempts. That login attempt could be a successful attempt and could be unsuccessful attempt. So when we were doing this login, search or the research for the login attempts, we found that a secure shell session has been initiated like 2 days ago, and that has access rights to the server. So it means someone accessed the system or the server 2 days ago via SSH session. So after doing such type of the activity, we can directly reject our second hypothesis, like accessing the system via console, while we can say that our first hypothesis, which is accessing the system via network, is valid, and yes, someone accessed the network or the server using the network access methodology. So this is one of the example in which you saw that how to create a questions, how to create the hypothesis, and how to test that hypothesis using different by observing different artifacts. So now, what is a report? So usually you write a report to communicate the results of your forensic examination of the computer or a network or a digital device. So a forensic report presents evidence that might support some further investigation, and in some situation acceptable in court or in administrative hearing, or even that sometime that is used as an affidavit to support issuing an arrest or search warrant. So a report can also provide justification for collecting more evidence. For example, if an employer is investigating employees' misconduct, a report might be the basis for any disciplinary action. In addition to presenting facts, report can also communicate expert opinion. So you must expect your report to be examined or cross-examined about your findings. So opposing party will definitely look for an opportunity to attack the facts you present, that you actually determined them by yourself or extracted them from other reports. So you need to know what facts affects your opinion and what facts don't affect your opinion. So digital forensic examiners are required to create different types of reports, such as a formal report consisting of the facts from your finding, a preliminary written or verbal report to your attorney, and also an examination plan for the attorney who has retained you. So a formal report of the forensic finding should give readers all of the information they need to evaluate the evidence and associated conclusions. So the general structure of the report includes the introduction section, which provides an overview of the case, the relevance of the evidence media being examined, who requested the forensic analysis, and what was requested. And the introduction section should also provide the bona fides of those who perform the work, including the summary of the relevant experience and trainings. So sometimes a full CV can be provided as an attachment to the report. The report also includes the evidence summary section. So that describes the items of the digital evidence that were analyzed, providing details that uniquely identify such as make, models, and serial number. It also considers including, it is also usually considered to include the MD5 hash values, photographs, sometimes the laboratory submission numbers, details of when and where the evidence was obtained, from whom the evidence was obtained, and its conditions, like is there any sign of damage or tampering on it or not. And of course, it is also important to include the processing methods and tools used in that investigation. The report also contains the examination summary section, which provides an overview of the critical findings relating to the investigation. So think of this as an executive summary with any recommendation or conclusions in a very short form. So this section is intended for the decision maker who may not have time to read the full report and just read to know the primary results of the forensic analysis. So in some situations, it is advisable to summarize tool used to perform the examination, how important data were, for example, recovered, for example, using the decryptions, and what type of tools were used to recover the deleted files, and how the irrelevant files were eliminated from the system or from the device. So whenever feasible, use the same language in the examination summary as it is used in the whole body of the report to avoid any confusions and to help the attentive readers associate the summary with the relevant sections in the detailed descriptions. There is also a section on the file system examination. So when dealing with the storage media, provide an inventory of the files, directories, and recovered data that are relevant to the investigation with important characteristics such as path, names, date and timestamps, MD5 values of each files, and the physical sector locations on the hard drive. Also, keep a note of any unusual absence of the data that may be an indication of the data destruction, such as mass deletions or reformatting or sometime wiping of the device. There is also a need of forensic analysis and findings sections in the report, which provides a detailed description of the forensic analysis performed and the resulting findings, along with the supporting evidence. So any detailed forensic analysis of a particular item that requires an extensive description can be provided in a separate subsection. So the report should clearly specify the location where each reference item was found. It enables others actually to replicate and verify the results in future. Of course, it is also important to describe important findings in the report, and it can be more clear and compelling to show with the photographs or screenshots or printouts of the evidence. There is also the last section, which is considered as a conclusion section. So a summary of the conclusion should follow logically from the previous sections in the report and should reference the supporting evidence. So it is important not to jump to the conclusions or make a statement about the innocence or guilt. So conclusion must be objective and must be based on the facts, and then lets the evidence speak by itself and avoid being judgmental. There is also an examination plan. So an examination plan is usually a document that serves as a guideline for knowing what questions to expect when you will be presenting your report. So your attorney uses the examination plan as an outline and as a guide for your evidence. So you can propose changes to clarify or define informations or to include substantial information the attorney might have omitted. So you can also use the examination plan to help your attorney learn the terms and functions used in the digital investigations. A verbal report is less structured than the written report. Typically, it takes place in the attorney's office. where the attorney requests the consultant's report. So, an expert hired as a trial consultant uses the verbal report often. Also, keep in mind that others cannot force your attorney to speak what you have told him or her in the verbal report. So, a verbal report is usually a preliminary report and addresses the areas of investigation yet to be completed. So, a report usually includes the sections, although the order of those sections varies and depending on the organizational guidelines or the case requirements. So each section should have a title indicating what you are discussing. So make sure it conveys the essential points of the section. For example, the body of your report might be titled as Investigating Investigation Findings for Intellectual Property Theft. If the report is long and complex, you should include an abstract. So typically, more people read the abstract than the entire report. So writing abstract for your report is important. The abstract and the table of content gives readers an overview about the report and its important points so that they can decide what part do they need to review. An abstract simply condenses the report's key points to focus on the essential information. It should be 1 or 2 paragraphs long, and the length should be around 150 to 200 words. The body consists of the introduction and the discussion sections. The introduction should state the report's purpose, like the questions to be answered, and should show that you are aware of its terms of reference. You should also state any method used and any limitations and indicate how the report is structured. It is important to justify why you are writing the report. So make sure you answer the questions like what is the problem? You should also give readers a map of what you are delivering. So introduce the problem, moving from broader issues to the more specific issue, finishing the introduction with the precise aim of the report, for example, key questions, and structure the introduction sections very carefully, setting up the process you use to develop the information in a logical order. Refer to the relevant fact, ideas, and theories as well as um, related research by the other people or other authors. Organize discussion sections logically under headings to reflect how you classify information and to ensure that your information remains relevant to the investigations. There are two other main sections that are conclusions and supporting material. So the supporting material includes references and appendices. So the conclusion starts by referring to the report's purpose, state the main point, draw conclusions, and sometimes possibly gives an opinion. So references and appendices list the supporting material to which your work refers. So appendices also provides additional resource material which are not included in the main body of the report. But you can also create your own structure to write a report based on your own experience and also based on your good practices. It is also recommended to follow the organizational template to write any report if you are writing a report for an organization. Okay, so to produce a clear and concise report, you should assess the quality of writing. For example, is it clearly written and easy to understand and read? Think of your readers and then decide how to make the report interesting to them. Also, is the information relevant and clearly organized? By checking the ideas and the organizations of the report, it is also important to check the grammar and the vocabulary, that is, the language is simple and direct so that the meaning is clear and text is not repetitive. Technical terms should be used consistently. You should not try to use a variety of these terms. So, using different words for the same things might raise some questions. There is also a need to see for the punctuation and spelling that are they correct and accurate and consistent. So, good expert report, I would say, share many qualities of other kinds of writings. So, a report should lay out the ideas in the logical order that facilitates the logical thinking. So make each sentence follow from the previous one, building an argument piece by piece. Also group related ideas and sentences into paragraphs and group paragraphs into sections. So create a flow from the beginning of the report to the end. The report should be grammatically sound, have correct spelling, and must be free of writing errors. It is also recommended to avoid jargons and slangs. So most lawyers and judges are not technically trained. So if the technical term must be used, define them in ordinary language. Defining acronyms and any abbreviations not used as a standard measurement unit is particularly important. So spell out all the acronyms the first time they are used. If there are any possibility of misunderstanding or misinterpreting any abbreviation, define it or use the full expression. For example, a small letter M is used routinely in the scientific and the technical writing as a measurement for the unit for the meter. But non-technical reader might think that it is an abbreviation for miles. So you must specify each acronyms clearly. Style is also very important, and style means the tone of language you use to address the reader. When writing a report, use a natural language style. For example, talk about yourself in the first person, not the third person. Also keep in mind that too many sentences containing I can become repetitive. A natural language style helps in keeping readers interested in what you are saying. You should also follow formal writing guidelines, so pay attention to the word usage, grammar, and spellings. Avoid vague languages and generalizations like there was a problem. So, this statement that there was a problem doesn't convey any useful information. You must be very specific and direct in defining the problem. So, most of the report describes what you did, so it should be in the past tense. But you can use present and future tenses as appropriate. Use active tenses rather than the passive voice to avoid boring writing. For example, the software recovered the following data is more direct and therefore more interesting to read than the following data was recovered by the software. Also, avoid including too many details and personal observations. Your only agenda should be finding the truth. So don't think in terms of catching somebody or proving something. It is not your job to win the case. So don't become an advocate for anything other than the truth and your honest opinion. So you must communicate calm and detached observation in your report. So don't become emotionally involved in the investigation. Always try to identify the flaws in your thinking and examination. It is better to identify flaws than to allow the opposing party to do it for you. Another aspect of writing clearly is choosing language that gives your reader signpost to what you are trying to communicate, draws their attention to a specific point, and show them the sequence of the processes. Signpost assists a reader in scanning the text quickly by highlighting the main points and logical development of the information. For example, the first substantive section of your report could start with the this report. This is the report of finding from the forensic examination of computer serial number 123456. Let's say. So the discussion of your examination procedures could be introduced with the first step in the examination was, the second step in the examination was, and so on. So first and seconds are signposts that shows the sequence of the information or tasks. Layout and presentation involves many factors, including using clear titles and section headings. A numbering system is also the part of the layout. So typically, report writer uses one of the two numbering systems, decimal numbering or legal sequential numbering. So after you choose a numbering system, be sure to follow it consistently throughout the report. A report using the decimal numbering system divides materials into sections and restart numbering with each main section. With this system, readers can easily can scan the headings and understand how one part of the report relates to the another part of the report. Okay, so providing supporting materials is also important. So use supporting materials such as figures, tables, data, and equations to tell the story as it unfolds. So refer to this material in the text and integrate the points they make into your writing. Number all figures and tables sequentially as they are introduced, for example, figure 1, figure 2, and table 1, table 2, and so on. Figure captions should supply descriptive information. In charts, label all axes, all the axes, x-axis, y-axis, z-axis. You need to label all axes and include units of measurement. So insert a figure or table after the paragraph in which it is first discussed or it is first mentioned. Formatting is important because you need to see that how you format text. So you can say the consistency is more important than the formatting. Okay, so how you format text is less important than being consistent in applying the same format. For example, if you indent paragraph, be sure all of the paragraphs are indented. So use fonts consistently and use consistent heading styles throughout the report. For example, major heading in bolds with initial capitals, minor headings in italic, and so on. Follow the same guidelines throughout the for the units of measurements as well. For example, use percentage symbol or percentage word, but don't use both. In other words, I can say that establish a template and then stick to it. Depending on the kind of the data, the explanation, examination, and data collection method sections might contain subsections on the examination procedures, materials, or the equipments, and sometimes the data collection and the sources, and analytical or the statistical techniques. So supply enough detail for the readers to understand what you did. So data collection is a critical portion of the report. If your data collection process becomes the subject of discovery or examination, presenting data in a well-organized manner becomes very important. So use tables in your report to illustrate how data was handled and examined. So as mentioned before, tables should be labeled clearly and numbered for easy referral. In most cases, hashing algorithms are used to calculate the hashes in the digital forensic investigations. If you use any hashing algorithm, be sure to give the common names to those hashing algorithms, such as Message Digest 5, which is known as MD5 hash. So generally, you don't need to give example of each type of the hash if you are using a standard tools. So you only need to explain generally what they do and cite the authority or the policy you rely on for using those tools. For example, to explain why you are using the MD5 hash, you might cite the National Software Reference Library as an authority. So you could also cite a court case, for example, in which the tool's validity has been accepted previously. Providing for the uncertainty and error analysis also important. So in digital forensics, many results can be absolutely true, but it might be a guess if you overreach that to the to the results. Therefore, a statement of limitation of knowledge and uncertainty is necessary to protect your credibility. For example, if you are using a timestamps for a file in the Windows operating system to indicate that the file was created at certain time, you need to acknowledge that PC clock could be reset easily. In addition, you should state that there is no absolute assurance that the file timestamp is uh, the perfect reflection of its creation time. But there might be other reliable indicators such as the timestamps of the other sources, other files, creation timestamps for the directories, creation orders of a certain files, for example, and the information about the automatic backups. There is also important to explain the results and conclusions. So explain your findings using subheadings to divide the discussion into logical parts or logical order. So make comments on the result as they are presented. Discussed, discuss the importance of what you found in the light of overall report's objectives. Take a step back from the details and synthesize what has and has not been learned about the problem and what the information means. Describe what you actually found, not what you hope to find. So, including this discussion as you present results can often improve the clarity and reader's understanding, of course. Link your discussion to the figures and tables as you present results and describe and interpret what these supporting materials show. If you have many similar figures then select the representative example for the main report and put the rest of the figures in the appendix. The conclusion should restate the objectives, aims, and key questions, and then summarize your findings with clear and concise statements. So keep the conclusion very brief and to the point. Referencing is also very important in the report. So when you write a report, you must cite references to all the materials you have used as a source for the content of your work. These citations are made whenever you quote, paraphrase, or summarize someone else's opinion, theories, or the data of someone else. References can include books, newspapers, websites, conference proceedings, personal communications, and even interviews. So in the main section of your report, typically you cite references with the author's last name and the years of publication enclosed in the parentheses. In the reference section, you list all the sources in the alphabetical order by the author names and provide publication information. So give enough details so that someone else could track down the information easily. Appendices are also included in the report. So if necessary, you can include appendices containing the material such as the raw data and figures which are not used in the main body of the report. Arrange them in the logical order referred which are in the order referred to in the report, which are like they are presented in the report. So they are considered additional material and might not be actually examined by the reader. So some portion of the appendices might be considered optional, but there are other portions which are required. So in today's session, we saw that the report should answer the questions that you were retained to answer. Question that you were retained to answer. Okay. Also, a well-defined report structure and understanding we saw in these sessions. Why the clarity of the report is very important and critical, so that your findings can be effectively communicated to the other and non-technical people. Also, the tone of the report is very important, like the style of the report. So convey a tone of the objective and must be detached in your observations. Then we also discussed the policy of the report should exist, like most likely report templates that you must use. So many organizations have their own templates. So in that case, you must stick to that template and follow that. If there is no, so you can also create your own template and based on your experience and good practices. That brings us to the end of this session. Thank you very much for your attention.